Mhm. Welcome back to Candidly Fierce, where we have real conversations about truth, self trust, and what it really takes to stop asking the world for permission to become yourself. I'm your host, Therese Alexander. Can I ask y'all something? When did you stop trusting yourself? No, seriously. Think about that for a second. Because I don't think most of us woke up one day and decided, you know what? I'm going to stop trusting myself. I don't think it happened like that at all. I think it happens little by little, one opinion, one disappointment, one mistake, one moment where somebody convinces you that they know your life better than you do. And before you know it, you're asking everybody else what they think about a life that they're never going to have to live. I spent years looking for permission because of the way I grew up. Permission to trust my gut, permission to make a decision, permission to choose a direct path, permission to trust the woman God created me to be. And here's what's crazy. Every time I ignored what I knew, my gut was still right. Anybody else's gut never steered them wrong. What I mean by that is, have you ever already known exactly what you were supposed to do and still called 3 people asking for advice? Because I have. I'd call one person, then another, then another, then another, right? And that cycle would repeat. So I know I just said I called 3 people, but in fact, it turns out to be way more than that, right? I called one person, then another, then another, then another. And it's pause. Because I called one person, then another, then another. I prayed about it. I'd overthink it. I wait. And months later, I end up doing exactly what my gut told me to do in the first place. After doing this a couple of times, I finally asked myself, how much time have you lost waiting for someone else to validate something God already placed inside of you? That question changed me. It made me realize that I wasn't asking people for advice. I really wasn't asking, really was just asking them for permission. Hmm. Now, pause. If you would have asked me a few years ago, Therese, are you asking people for permission? I probably would have looked at you like you had lost your mind. Permission? Me? Absolutely not. I'm the problem solver. People come to me for advice. People trust my judgment. I would have told you, you know what? I'm just getting another perspective. And honestly, I believe that because I know I don't know everything. I know my way isn't always the right way. So I thought I was doing the wise thing. And hear me, there is absolutely nothing wrong with getting another perspective. There is absolutely nothing wrong with seeking advice from wise counsel. And there is absolutely nothing wrong with praying. I believe you are seeking wisdom if you do all of those things. In fact, I still do all of these things today. So that's not what I'm talking about. The question isn't, are you asking people? The question is, why are you asking them? Because there's a difference between seeking perspective, seeking advice, and seeking permission. Perspective helps you think. Advice helps you discover what's missing. Permission tells you whether you're allowed to move. Those are three completely different conversations. But there's a difference between seeking wisdom and outsourcing your life. Y'all, in a sense, I was outsourcing my life. Now, that's a crazy statement when you really think about it. But I say this because I stopped asking myself first. Think about that. I'd have a decision to make, and before I even stopped long enough to ask myself what I thought, I was already thinking, I wonder what they think. Let me see what they would do. And here's the crazy part. Sometimes I get 3, 4, 5 different opinions, all of which I secretly disagreed with. Now I'm more confused than when I started, and I'm questioning why I asked them in the first place, or even to begin with. Crazy, right? Have you ever been there? Have you been so confused or more confused than when you first started and secretly asking or questioning why I asked them to begin with? Because now everybody else has voted except the one person whose opinion matters the most. And that's the one person who actually has to live with the decision. And that was me. Now let that sit for a moment because that's when things became clearer to me. I had become more familiar with everybody else's voice than I was with my own. I could tell you what my parents would say. I could tell you what my friends would say. I could tell you what my mentors would probably say. But somewhere along the way, I realized that I could not tell you what Therese would say. I didn't stop to ask, Therese, what do you think? And that's when it hit me. It wasn't that I couldn't hear my intuition. It was that my intuition had gotten drowned out by everybody else's opinion. Not because they were trying to control me, but because I had given their voices more weight than my own. In a sense, I stopped looking for wisdom and I started looking for permission. Now, do y'all see the difference? One says, help me see what I might be missing. The other says, I already know what I want to do. I just need somebody else to be comfortable with my decision. And again, those are two completely different conversations. And I didn't realize it, right? I didn't realize, and I didn't realize it. Those are two completely different conversations, and I didn't realize it until recently. I wasn't asking people to help me make decisions. I was asking them to approve my life. I say that because when I really thought about it, every time I ignored my intuition, it cost me something. Sometimes it cost me time. Sometimes it cost me peace. Sometimes it cost me confidence. Sometimes it cost me opportunities. And sometimes it cost me another piece of myself. Because every time I ignored what I knew, I trusted myself a little less. Now, here's what's crazy. Looking back, My gut was usually right. Have you ever gotten to the end of a situation and thought, I knew that. I knew I should have walked away. I knew I should have trusted myself. I knew I never should have gotten here, right? I think the biggest thing that we always do once we do it, and I have the biggest problem here, is the I knew I should have walked away. I knew I shouldn't have done that. I knew I should have started. I knew I should have everything, right? Sometimes our problem is we need other people's permission to just go, to just execute, right? So I'm going to stop you here to say again, I know that you know I should have just started. I knew I should have walked away. I knew I should have started. I knew I should have. I have no idea what's wrong. I knew I shouldn't have done that. I knew I should have walked away. I knew I should have started. I can't get it to move. I knew I should have started. It won't move. Come on this side. If somebody can't, I can't move it from here. That's the problem. Oh, no. Okay. If we can start from right here, I'm cool with that. Okay, come on. I knew I should have spoken up. I knew that one of the hardest feelings in I knew that's one of the hardest feelings in the world. Not because you didn't know, but because you didn't trust what you knew. And for me, that became a cycle. I ignore my intuition. Things wouldn't work out. I lose confidence. Then because I had lost confidence, I trust myself even less the next time. Do y'all see the cycle? The more I ignored myself, the quieter my own voice became. Until one day I realized I could recognize everybody else's voice better than I could recognize my own. And that hurt. So you may be asking, how do you start trusting yourself again? Because if you spent years, and I mean years, of second guessing yourself, years asking everybody else, years waiting for somebody to tell you it's okay, how do you change that? I'll tell you what I had to do, what I had to realize. Trust isn't something you decide, it's something you build. Now, I know that sounds simple, but I never thought about it like that before. Think about it. If somebody kept breaking promises to you, would you trust them? Probably not. So, why was I expecting myself to trust me? I asked that because I kept breaking promises to myself. That one hit me. I consider myself loyal to a fault. And I realized that I wasn't loyal to the person who mattered to me the most, me. I say that because I had become really good at making promises. You know, I'm going to start Monday. I'm going to launch it next month. I'm going to take better care of myself. I'm going to stop people pleasing. I'm going to set boundaries. I'm going to trust my gut this time. And then life would happen. Somebody would need me. Something else would come up. I get distracted. I get tired. I talk myself out of it. And before I knew it, I had broken another promise to myself. Now, hold on. I want y'all to think about something. How many promises have you broken to yourself this year? Not to anybody else, but to you. Because when I first thought about it, I didn't think that I was breaking promises to myself, right? I had to sit with that question again. How many promises had I broken to myself this year? Not last year, not next year, but this year, and not to anybody else, to me. Because when I first asked myself this question, I almost answered it too quickly. I thought, oh, not that many. Then I started thinking. I told myself I was going to start working out. Then I stopped. I told myself I was going to protect my peace. Then I answered that phone anyway. I told myself I was going to trust my gut. Then I called 3 people. I told myself I was going to put fierce first. Then the world broke in TNT and I started chasing money again. And before I knew it, I had spent years proving to myself that I couldn't trust my own words. Y'all, that realization broke me because I wasn't waiting on other people to believe in me. I had stopped believing in me. We get upset when other people let us down, but we rarely stop and think about how many times we've let ourselves down and how many times, and every time we do, we chip away at the relationship we have with ourselves. That's why I don't think confidence and self trust are the same thing anymore. I used to think they were. Now I don't. Because confidence says, I think I can. Self trust says, I know I'm going to show up. Those are two different conversations because I've met a lot of confident people who don't trust themselves. And I've met people who don't feel confident at all, but they had learned to keep their word to themselves. You know what changed everything for me? I stopped waiting to feel different. I started keeping small promises. And if I said I was going to do something, I did it. Not because it was always convenient, not because I always felt like it, but because I was rebuilding something. I was rebuilding my relationship with me. One promise, one decision, one act of courage at a time. And the crazy part, the more I kept my word, the quieter everybody else's opinions became. Not because they stopped talking, because we know that they're not. Because I finally started listening to myself, and that changed everything. You know, that changed everything. You know, because I finally started listening to myself. That changed everything. You know, if you would have asked me a few years ago if I trusted myself, I probably would have said yes. I had degrees, I had experience, I helped build businesses. People came to me for advice. From the outside, it looked like I was confident, but confidence on the outside does not always mean trust on the inside. And I had to learn the difference because here's what I've learned. Trusting yourself doesn't mean you'll always make the right decision. It just means you trust yourself enough to handle whatever decision you make. Now, that changed my perspective because I stopped putting so much pressure on myself to get everything right. Instead, I started asking myself a different question. Therese, do you trust yourself enough to just figure it out? Y'all, that's the question that changed my life. Not, am I going to make the right decision? Because none of us know that. The question became, do I trust Therese enough to figure it out if I don't? And every single time the answer was yes. Not because I had all the answers, but because life had already proven something to me. I've survived hard seasons before. Hmm. I figured things out before. I've started over before. I've made mistakes before. So why was I acting like the next mistake was going to be the one that took me out? It wasn't. Matter of fact, when I really think about it, every difficult season taught me something I couldn't have learned any other way. Every setback made me stronger. Every disappointment made me wiser. Every mistake gave me experience. So maybe the goal isn't to stop making mistakes. Maybe the goal is to stop doubting the person who's going to learn from them. Now let that sit for a minute because I think some of us have been waiting on confidence when we really need self trust. Confidence comes and goes. Some days you feel it, some days you don't. But self trust, that's different. Self trust is built every time you keep your word, every time you choose yourself, every time you stop asking the world to vote on a life that they don't have to live. Can I ask y'all one last question? What would your life look like if you trusted yourself just a little bit more? Not because you know everything, not because you're guaranteed to get it right, but because you finally realize you've been stronger than you gave yourself credit for all along. And if you don't remember anything else from today's conversation, remember this: you are your greatest investment. So start acting like it. Thank you for joining me for another episode of Candidly Fierce. If this conversation challenged you, encouraged you, or gave you something to think about, make sure you follow, subscribe, and share this episode with someone who needs it to hear it or just listen to it again. Until next time, stay fierce. Bye.